Good morning, everyone. It is Saturday, June 8th, and I'm your host, Dan Sissig, for the Saturday Morning Mastermind, or on YouTube if you join the link there, Mastery Mindset Mastery Collective. And right now we are covering the book called Atomic Habits by James Clear. Hopefully, we'll have a couple other of the normal panel members jumping on. Um, Things have been really kind of getting busy and crazy for a lot of us as people have been working on different opportunities and things that are going on in their life. So, not to slow them down, but their hearts and their desires are to be here just as much as always. But sometimes we can't always all be here every single time, but we are here in spirit and in love and everything. So, getting ready to jump into this book. Once, if they can get on, we'll let them join in. But right now we are on chapter 8 in the book. Let me get to that. I read it last night. It's called How to Make a Habit Irresistible. Now, as you know, just kind of summarize, we've been learning about habits, about, you know, some different steps and processes about habits, and also about their surprising power of habits and how they tend to just come about through everyday life and through cure cures and triggers that are set up in everyday life that help elicit responses to those things that help build habits. But we're also learning how to break habits and to build new habits, to replace the habits we'd like to change and everything like that. So once again, here's the book Atomic Habits by James Clear, and let's get into chapter 8. Let me get back to that page again because um, so this is under a section in the book called The Second Law, Make It Attractive. And again, as I said, chapter 8 talks about how to make a habit irresistible. And in the beginning of the chapter, it talks about in the 1940s, a Dutch scientist named Nico Tinbergen performed a series of experiments that transformed the understanding what motivates us. And Tinbergen, who eventually won a Nobel Prize for this work, was investigating herring gulls. The gray and white birds often seen flying along the seashores here in North America. And what he learned about um, the herring gulls is that um, when they're born with a little small red dot on their beak. Now, I don't know, everybody's probably is a little different, just like humans. You know, we all have a lot of the same features, but we also have different things that, based on our genetics and how we are set up, make things, one size on somebody a little smaller. It could be bigger, little spot. But in that study, he learned that the newly hatched chicks, whenever the parent came around, and it seemed like the parent would have food, I guess, in their bill, um, they would peck at this little red spot, and they would peck on it whenever they wanted food. And it seemed, just at first he thought, oh, it was just um, nothing much, but then he said he began to experiment, and he created a collection of fake cardboard pieces, just a head without the body. And when the parents were gone out doing what they needed to, uh, hang on, somebody's having an issue. Hang on. Let me see if I can help the one panelist. Um, See if I can get to her. My computer, sorry, is also running slow, so give me a minute with that. Okay, let's see if I can get. Sorry about that. I've got two people trying to get on, and they're having troubles with their cell phones. So give me a second. I apologize. But it's interesting from that study that as he did more and more of the study, he made the dots bigger, and it seemed to make the little herring gulls uh, peck at it even more and faster and more. Um, it seemed that no matter whether they were there or not, or how the bigger it was, the more intense they would. Uh, peck at it and want to be fed, and that was interesting because he deducted from that. So hang on, I'm still trying to get them on. So let me go back to where I'm at. Mm-mm. Sorry, still trying to get them on, but sorry about this. This is unusual in how we're. I'm trying to find a phone number to try and send the link to one of the people.
Hello?
Hello? Who's Catherine? Yay!
Okay, I figured out how to get on here. Let me go back to the Facebook thing and let her know how to do it.
Okay. Okay, we got one person, so we will continue here in a minute. But I'll go on while she's getting her help. Um, Samantha's there too. Yay!
Yeah, send a link to Catherine via text. That worked. I don't know why that worked.
Uh, she, Catherine's on.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Is there a lot of background noise?
There is background noise, but I can hear you, so we'll deal with it. We'll go from there.
Okay, let me see if I can mute out where my mute button is. Oh, okay, it's kind of hidden. Let's see. All right, I'm just gonna stay muted, and if you see me reaching for the phone, it's just to adjust my volume, and I will stop if I want to talk. That way I'm not trying to distract myself while I'm driving. Okay?
No problem.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
So what I found that worked for me was I copied the link and I put it in the Google browser.
Yeah, and I texted it to her by her phone number and gave it the link that way, and it worked that way for her too.
Okay, cool. So at least we know how to
So
get it now.
so you're both on. She's muted in the background, and I was just really basically starting at the beginning of the chapter. Um, so if you want to introduce yourself really quick, go ahead, and then we'll pick up from there.
Hello, this is Catherine Clement in Boulder, Colorado.
And I'm so glad that they're both here. It makes it nicer when we have more people here, so to go back and forth and all that. So with that, I was covering the beginning of the chapter, talking about Nico Tinbergen's study with the herring gulls and how the little red patch on the beak and how the baby, uh, the newly hatched gulls would peck at the uh, red spots when they were hungry, and when the parents had flown away, he used these fake heads with the red spots on it, and it seemed that no matter how big the spot was, if it was bigger, it seemed to intensify their desire to peck at it and to let the parent know that it was hungry, even though it was a fake head. So that was interesting because it led to him being awarded a uh, Nobel Prize in that area to learn how we are driven by some parts of genetics and how we respond and react and what cues and things we take from our environment to help elicit habits and the things that we do on a regular basis. So, with that, I hope you're a little more caught up now, and we can go from there. And and then he said he eventually created a beak with three large red dots on it when he placed it over the next to the baby birds, they went just crazy with delight, and they just pecked at it like crazy. And it's funny how he leads into this about how businesses and corporations have learned how to hit our, for lack of a better way of saying it, our sweet spot when it comes to things that, especially like things with sugar, um, carbohydrates, things like that, that well out when man was out foraging and we didn't have all the luxuries we have now and all the choices of food and things, man would eat, a lot to fill him, but he would eat things that, he would find and were available. And so therefore there were not a lot of sweets and sugars and things readily available. So therefore, our desire, because it wasn't, he talked about something about that something in regards to like where kind of out of sight out of mind, or the desire. I gotta kind of get my focus back on where I am in the book. Oh, he said, uh now I found it. He said humans are prone to fall to exaggerated versions of reality. Junk food, for example, drives our reward system into a frenzy. After spending hundreds and thousands of years hunting and foraging for food in the wild, the human brain has evolved to place a high value on salt, sugar, and fat. Such foods are often calorie dense, and they were quite rare when our ancestors, leading up to what I was saying a little bit, were roaming the savannah. When you don't know where your next meal is coming from, eating as much as possible is an excellent strategy for survival. Today, however, we live in a calorie rich environment. Food is abundant, but your brain continues to crave it like it is scarce. And that's what he was talking about, how our bodies and our systems in that sense, have not really changed much. We're still really in that mode of our brains operating based on how it was designed and how to operate at through efficiency and to kind of tell us, when we need food and when we don't need food or when the desire. But in that, he said also, but the craving persists because the brain's reward centers have not changed for approximately 50,000 years. The modern food industry relies on our Paleolithic instincts beyond their evolutionary process. And so, have you read the chapter yet, Catherine? I'd like to hear your thoughts on that for a second. I need to step away to the restroom really quick anyway. Sorry.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting about the baby birds. You wouldn't think that they would be pecking at a fake cardboard head with a red dot on it, but evidently they're just, we're kind of we're just kind of programmed to. Dan, you might want to mute. Um, we're just kind of programmed to work almost robotically, and absolutely these food manufacturers take advantage of that fact that we are, they know, they study these things, they research these things, they know that we're programmed for these things. And I thought that it was really interesting. A little bit later in the chapter, he's talking about dopamine and how the stimulus, um, certain things activate dopamine in our systems, but after a while we get programmed almost like Pavlov's dog. If you're familiar with that, it's Pavlov's dog was an experiment done. Dan, can you mute your line, please? Um,
Oh,
thanks. Um, Pavlov's dog was an experiment done by, I forget which psychiatrist back in the day did it, but basically they trained this dog that every time, they would ring a bell and then they would feed him a treat. And they would ring a bell and feed him a treat. Well, pretty soon, all they had to do was ring the bell and it made the dog start salivating because he knew he was getting ready to eat. And pretty much that's how dopamine works in our system is a lot of these things that we do that make us feel better, it's because it stimulates dopamine. And after a while, we develop a habit, and then it's not even the thing itself that stimulates the dopamine, it's just the the thought or the action of maybe, getting your, say you're a bicyclist, bicycling activates dopamine, but pretty soon you're just thinking about going bicycling and it's activating the dopamine. So we're really all just a bunch of drug addicts running around, whether we know it or not, whether it's dopamine or sugar or whatever it is that's rewarding us, But I thought that I really found the bird experiment fascinating, and I think that the some of the techniques that he talks about as far as um, stacking our habits, and we'll get further into that, and I'm sure you'll talk about that, Dan. Stacking our habits to trigger this dopamine release and stuff, we can really kind of help ourselves develop new habits by using this ingrained um, these
process.
patterns in our bodies. Yeah, process, that's the good word right there.
Well, but to jump in and add to you, because he talks in the book, and you were talking about, how companies and stuff, and he calls it the bliss point for each product. And like I said, going back to the dopamine and how just the thought or it's not the reward that we're getting it, that we're getting the reward. It's the anticipating the excitement of that reward, fact of, and that's what he said was interesting about what motivates us. That's what gets us motivated to do something, is the anticipation. It's not the actual reward itself. And I've always thought it would, growing up, I always thought it was the reward. It's like I would throw a temper tantrum or get upset because I really wanted something. So I get the reward. So I was happy. But I'm trying to pay it a little more attention now as after having read the chapter. And it's like, well, I do tend to get a little more. I can feel it in my body, like at work when it starts getting closer and closer to 5 o'clock and getting ready to get. I feel a difference in my body. I start getting excited and looking forward to getting out of there and gone and away from there. I'll be honest, I'm not the most happiest with my job, but it's a job that helps pay my bills. It doesn't pay them all, but uh, the thought of getting done and out releases something in me, and I can feel it, and I'm understanding that now a little bit more, that it's the anticipating of getting out. Once I'm out, it's kind of like it just dissipates and goes away, and so I've gotten the reward, but I'm not excited anymore. I'm like on the drive home, and I'm over that anticipation. So that's interesting how through his research and stuff and things like that, and then having read about the dopamine driven effect of it, how it works, and how he also talks about how it works with the dopamine, how when we are expecting reward, we don't necessarily get it, or it's delayed, how we tend to, you know, get that big lull or that big drop or that, to me, I call it a big low, because all of a sudden you get that, you're way up here, and then all of a sudden you go way down here. But then if you get the reward a little bit later, you kind of come back up again, but not as high. And that's what that was interesting, because I have experienced that, too myself. And this book is really making me kind of put all those things together and understand that in my habits and stuff, that's part of, you know, and that's where he talks about making the habit attractive. And we talked about it a little bit before, but in this sense, it helps bring in the real breakdown of why it's attractive and why we, is because our bodies are inherently and innately geared that way for that bit. So the more we understand how that works and can put it into play with habit stacking and building new habits, and he calls it temptation building on top of habit stacking. Whereas we talked about habit stacking, where we say after current habit, I will, and then habit that you want to insert. So that's where you're trying to build a new habit. And that's when you tell yourself that, okay, after I get my morning coffee, I will um, do such and such and things like that. But he's talking here about doing the habit stacking as well as temptation building. So he says in here, after current habit, I will have it I need. So say like you get up in the morning, you do part of your normal routine, but you want to exercise more. Kind of like what Samantha was talking about, where she was wanting to do a little more exercising, and she implemented um, the riding her bike, and she found a way of doing it, like watching a video, you know, to help make it more entertaining and more enjoyable, but she also inserted it as part of her routine. So she kind of did both of them without realizing she was doing both of them at that time. And going back in hindsight, I can see, how what she did is right in line with this book, without even really knowing it at the time. But and then after the I will habit I need, then after habit I need, I will insert the habit that you want. So then it's kind of, so in essence, you're really building upon those changes and rewiring your system, as we talked about it before, that you can rewire your system. Now, you'll probably never fully erase any of those underlying things that are built into, for lack of a better word, our circuitry as humans, and how our basic design is, through what the universe, God, the creator, infinite intelligence has created in us. And to me, that still just explains that there's so much more out there. And I believe it is a higher power that has so intricately designed us, um, to give us those things. So, um, what other things did you get out of this chapter, Catherine, or that you might want to bring out that you remember as I peruse again and refresh my memory?
Well, you covered it all pretty good. It was actually a really short chapter, and there's not. I mean, like you said, some of the things we've talked about before, like the habit stacking and things like that. Um, he talks about utilizing that dopamine to kind of like the food companies are utilizing it against us. We can utilize it against ourselves, basically, to set up these new habits by pairing it one habit that triggers that dopamine with another habit that we might not necessarily want to do, but because of the dopamine, it'll make us do it. um, I haven't tried doing that yet to see how it works, but I'm sure that it does, because these drives for sugar or dopamine or whatever it is, these are very strong, pushes. It's kind of like, think about a teenager when all their hormones are coming in. I mean, as a species, we're programmed, we're pre-wired to keep the species going and procreate. And so when a teenager's hormones are going off, they're almost like uncontrollable. Um, and that's how all of these sugar and dopamine and all these other urges go as well. So I think it's a smart thing to do, to utilize what we already have. I mean, obviously it can go good or bad, but it's definitely, we know that it works, basically, is what I'm saying. We know that this works because that's how these companies become billion-dollar companies, is by utilizing these techniques. So I think that's cool that he figured that out, and shared that with us in this book. I'd love to hear Samantha's thoughts if she's at a place where she can chime in.
Yeah, I can jump in for just a moment, kind of in between locations here. So, or well, I'm at one location, so I can talk for a minute. Um, what I was just going to say is that Dan, when you were talking about the fact that the anticipation part is the thing that is really, it's leading up, it's that leading up to, that is the thing that we most, or that most drives us. And it's, the reward isn't really the thing that is the driver, it's the anticipation of the reward. And I had a thought when you were reminding me about that part of the chapter. I'm like, I think it works that way also when we get in habits of like stress, things that we were like anticipating a bad thing happening, and then we get, that all of that works up inside of us, and we get addicted to that feeling. Kind of like, and it ends up being a habit also, particularly, if we are faced with similar events all the time. And then when we actually are in the event, it's not as bad as what we think it is. I don't know. That was just something that popped up for me. And then also on that same note, when I was kind of created my own little habit string or habit stack, it is totally, it's the anticipation. I love coffee in the morning, and that's a big thing. And so that's kind of like, okay, I have to do these other two things before I get to have my coffee. And, and that helps motivate me to do it. And then with like my bicycling, watching the video. The other morning I watched a video, and it wasn't even a bicycling video. It was a video that somebody had flown a drone up, and they were taking all of the scenic imagery in like the mountains and mountain lakes and meadows and all of that. It just played some music, and I was just as happy riding my bike to that as I was to the ones that were actually bicycling videos, which was really interesting to me. It's just I don't know. So I have that little bit of an anticipation for nature in the morning, and that's kind of one way I can get it before the sun comes up. And I just have to ride my bike in order to let myself watch those videos, I guess, because otherwise, sitting anywhere, just sitting watching those videos seems like completely unproductive. But okay, I better get productive now. So I'll let you guys go back to talking.
Well, I'll jump in and I'll throw. Yeah, because it's interesting now that you brought up the idea of conversely, the anticipation of things that when we're going through stress and stuff and things like that, and getting similar, like for me and on a more personal level, whenever I get into instances of where I'm arguing or fighting or something like that with somebody, or I get this weird feeling, and I do I like you were saying, I anticipate and envision the worst and things going back, and that's brought up through things I experienced in my childhood that are very ingrained and very a part of me, but are things that in that situation probably will never be as bad or as intense as what I went through. But yet that mindset and that, the dopamine and that, my body's like setting up for that type of response. And I can, I physically feel it. I'm not focused on it when I'm in it, but after I come back down and I realized how tense or how tight or how, worked up I got, and I know it's the dopamine, and then it's the, you know, um, adrenaline and stuff that's, part of that, and in anticipation of something that's so far worse than what it really is. So I think that's another thing you can use, that type of, if you can harness it in the right way, along with what he says in this book for habit stacking and temptation building, and using those things to help build the right type of habits that you want. I think those are powerful tools, and I think you were great in talking about that, Catherine. That you know the more we understand how our minds and bodies work, to the degree that businesses and companies know, like when they do commercials and selling stuff and what to pinpoint, what to use, sex, food, um, wealth, things like that, that tend to push things that excite and give people that anticipation. I think the better off we'll be in understanding how to change things for our own bodies and our own habits and our own lives for the better. And so, again, like I said, the chapters seem to be pretty straightforward and pretty small. He doesn't fluff it up. He doesn't go all out and into stuff. He gives you what you need to know. He explains it, but it's the chapters have been fast reading, but they're packed and powerful. And that's why I really love this book too, is how condensed it is, but yet how chock full of stuff. And every time I read it after I'm done, I'm like, well, I need to work on employing these things in this. Now it's just getting into the habit and doing it better and setting up that game plan of doing the things I want to do as I'm continually going through this book. Um, so with that, I'm going to go over the chapter summary, and then I'll let anybody have whatever, if they have anything or they want to add or in from that. But he says in the chapter summary, the second law of behavior change is make it attractive. And I think if we understand the idea of the dopamine and how that works and how that can be worked in a positive way, we can turn the things that we don't necessarily want to do into more attractive things by doing the habit stacking and temptation building, as we talked about. The more attractive an opportunity is, the more likely it is to become habit forming. And I agree, the more, like Samantha was saying, even though on the bicycle, doing the bike riding and stuff, it's exercise and not something that she equates with being enjoyable, but she has made it more enjoyable to do by watching the videos and then watching that one drone one that she watched yesterday. I understand that, like me with music, I get when I get into certain modes or mindset, music can really help me get into anticipation of things and stuff like that, and help change my mood and stuff like that. So for me, maybe like, riding a bike or something like stationary bike, it might be a mixture of music and videos and stuff like that to help me, look past the part of the exercise I'm not enjoying, and that could be ways to help with stuff like that. I'm sure Catherine has had to do things with because of her injury and things over the years of what helped motivate her, help get her to do things that she needs to do to help in relation to dealing with her injuries and stuff like that, to make it to where she can cope and do things and live a more normal and productive life, in that sense. Then habits are dopamine driven feedback loop. And when dopamine rises, so does our motivation to act. And I challenge people that if you're listening or watching this or whatever, pay attention to that. Pay attention to things when you are involved in anticipating something, how you feel and how it makes you feel. And remember that, so that way going into the future, you can use that to utilize and build bigger and better habits that you want, and to change the habits that you want to change. And then he says it is the anticipation of a reward, not the fulfillment of it, that gets us to take action. The greater the anticipation, the greater the dopamine spike. And again, that goes in with what we were just talking about, the dopamine driven feedback loop. And then temptation bundling is one way to make your habits more attractive. The strategy is to pair an action you want to do with an action you need to do. And I think we've seen that from what Samantha has done. And I hope and challenge that you guys will try that yourselves and doing things that you want to change and alter to help improve your life for what you want. So now I'll throw it open to anybody who has a moment, if they want to say anything or do anything or add to this. And again, it's a short chapter, so we'll probably close early again this week.
Yeah, I totally used that. I didn't realize it until just now, but like I totally used that to help me get out of the wheelchair. I used the fact that I needed to survive because I was in so much pain. I knew that I wasn't going to move unless I had to move to survive, basically. So, for those of you that don't know the story, I moved off grid up in the mountains and I basically had to walk to pick up sticks to burn to stay alive because it was so cold. So, I totally used that technique. I just didn't realize I was using it at the time, but now I see that's exactly what I did. And I can tell you that it worked tremendously. So, absolutely, because the last thing that I wanted to do was move because I was in so much pain. And so habit stacking and utilizing our own instincts to survive, whether it be around food or movement or whatever, it absolutely works. And I thought one of the analogies that he brought up in the chapter, which I could totally relate to, not only on a personal level, but having children and grandchildren, the anticipation of Christmas morning, floods everybody with dopamine. And it's more the anticipation. I mean, not that people don't enjoy getting the presents and opening the presents and all that, but it's really more the anticipation of it that gets us high than it is the actual doing of Christmas morning, because Christmas morning you're actually like waking up 2 hours early and it's and there's a big mess to clean up, and the reality of Christmas morning is sometimes not always as good as the anticipation of it. So I think everybody can understand that one for sure. And it was a great little chapter. I enjoyed the the things that he pointed out, and I'm not sure how many more chapters there are in this book. Um, this was chapter 8, so next week we're going to be on chapter 9, and I don't know how many more there are, or at what point we're going to have to start looking for a new book.
Just to quickly jump out and tell you that answer, we have 20 chapters in this book.
Oh, wow. So we don't have to even think about that for a little while then.
Well, it depends on if all these chapters are like they've been. They've been fast, condensed, good chapters. But I'm sorry. I think he does a great job of condensing and putting things in and not throwing so many other things out there. But he gives you enough of a backdrop to understand where he's coming from. And then he gives you the information and what you can do and the habits and the things you can change and what you can use and utilize to make the changes. But he doesn't throw a lot of things in here just to fill up a book, even though he has 20 chapters. But I'm assuming, I'm sure there might be one or two that are probably maybe a little bit longer. But I'm going to assume, based on what I've been reading through all the chapters we've read so far, that he's going to follow that same idea. And so, who knows? We might finish it still pretty quick compared to some other books where we've taken longer and stuff like that. So, um, I think Samantha still is in the midst of doing what she's doing, so not really available to chat or say much. But I again think I keep saying this every week, but I think this book, along with The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson, if you get these two books and really put them together and you utilize them both to work on changing things and aspects of your life to change the habits and help build the things that you want to build into creating that best possible you that you want to create. I think they're great books to do that, along with all the other books we've read and gone through and studied. They all help and build and uh, get us to where I think we can be the best person that we want to be. So, with that, I have nothing else. I don't know if Samantha has a brief moment, if she wants to throw anything out there for us, or if not. No, she can't. Okay. So she's okay. Catherine, thanks for joining. I appreciate you guys being here. Samantha, thanks for joining also in the midst of what you're doing. We should be here next week, as always, ready to take on chapter 9. And that is, just to give you a little prelude, the role of family and friends in shaping your habits. Now, that one I think is going to be interesting because I know my family and some of the things and habits that I've built and created have definitely been influenced by my family and friends. So, with that, I look forward to that chapter. So, Catherine, any last things, or are you good?
I'm good. Have a great week, everybody.
Okay, so for that, thanks for joining us on Saturday Morning Mastermind, and on YouTube as Mindset Mastery Collective. Don't forget to click like and subscribe and join it. Or if you do want to join it and find out more, go to our Facebook page. I think it's also under Mindset Mastery Collective there. And if you want to be a panelist on here, get in touch with one of us and we can help you be up here and sharing your thoughts and your views with us also. So have a great week. Look forward to seeing you next week and talk to you guys later. Bye.